You're asking for an extra $467 million, is that right?
In the increased amount of money that we're asking for, that's approximately right, yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, in the past, let's say 40 years, has the Department of Justice ever come before Congress and said, we don't need any more, we're going to make it with what we've got in light of the fiscal circumstances in the country?
I normally wouldn't want to speculate, but in this case, I can't imagine that the Department of Justice, facing increasing threats every year, violent crime, threats to our national security, drug trafficking threats.
Is that a no?
I don't know the answer, but I think it would be surprising if the department ever asked for less money. I think that would be not responsible.
You talked in a little bit in your testimony, General, about guns, and you've been very outspoken about the need for more gun control. With respect, and if you don't mind me asking, do you own a gun?
I don't.
Okay. Have you ever fired a gun?
Many times.
Okay. Do you have 24-hour security?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Congress Lens. I'm Audrey, and if that clip you just watched didn't make you sit up a little straighter, I don't know what will. What Senator John Kennedy did in that hearing is exactly what many Americans wish more lawmakers would do. Ask direct, uncomfortable questions and refuse to let the conversation drift into vague talking points. Whether you agree with Attorney General Merrick Garland or not, you have to admit that Kennedy came prepared. Kennedy was not there for polite small talk. Kennedy was there to get answers about government spending, border security, the fentanyl crisis, and the very sensitive issue involving Hunter Biden. The way Kennedy framed those questions was direct and hard to dodge. What stood out to me immediately was Kennedy's tone. Kennedy was not shouting or trying to steal the spotlight. Kennedy was calm and focused, but the questions themselves were sharp. When Kennedy pressed Garland on the Department of Justice budget, you could tell Kennedy wanted clarity. Not estimates and not rough guesses. Kennedy wanted clear answers about how much taxpayer money is being requested and why. That matters because this money comes from the American public. When the Department of Justice asks for billions more, someone in that room has to ask the tough follow-up questions. In this case, that person was Senator John Kennedy. Then the conversation moved into guns, fentanyl, and cooperation with Mexico. Kennedy was not just throwing out political talking points. Kennedy was pushing for accountability and trying to understand what the administration is actually doing about major problems. The fentanyl crisis is devastating communities across the United States, and Kennedy clearly wanted to know what pressure the government is willing to apply internationally to stop it. And of course, the moment that really caught attention was when Kennedy brought up Hunter Biden and the tax issue. Kennedy asked the question that many people watching from home have probably wondered about. Why did the statute of limitations expire on alleged unpaid taxes tied to more than $1 million in income? You saw Garland's response. Garland pointed to Special Counsel David Weiss and emphasized that the investigation is independent and ongoing. But Kennedy did not just move on. Kennedy pressed the issue, and that persistence is exactly what congressional oversight is supposed to look like. Today we are going to break down the exchange, talk about what Kennedy was really trying to highlight, and why moments like this matter during congressional hearings. Before we jump into the reaction, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Congress Lens, and turn on notifications so you do not miss any of our breakdowns of the biggest moments happening in Washington. All right, let's get into it.
Nice to see you again. Thank you for being here. Your current budget, by my calculations, is $48.3 billion. Is that right?
The budget request is for $37.8 billion, the FY25 budget, and that would constitute a 3.5% increase over.
But with mandatory spending, your budget's 48.3. Is that right?
I don't have the number for including mandatory, but I'll certainly be able to get back to you for that.
Well, let's take out mandatory. Your discretionary budget right now is $37.8 billion.
The FY25 request is for 37.8.
That's not what I'm asking.
I'm sorry?
What's your current budget?
Well, it's 3.5% less than that, so I can take out my calculator and do the math, but I don't have it in front of me.
All right, well, let me put it another way. You're asking for an extra $467 million, is that right?
In the increased amount of money that we're asking for, that's approximately right, yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, in the past, let's say 40 years, has the Department of Justice ever come before Congress and said, we don't need any more, we're going to make it with what we've got in light of the fiscal circumstances in the country?
I normally wouldn't want to speculate, but in this case, I can't imagine that the Department of Justice, facing increasing threats every year, violent crime, threats to our national security, drug trafficking threats,
Is that a no?
I don't know the answer, but I think it would be surprising if the department ever asked for less money. I think that
Okay.
would be not responsible.
You talked in a little bit in your testimony, General, about guns, and you've been very outspoken about the need for more gun control. With respect, and if you don't mind me asking, do you own a gun?
I don't.
Okay. Have you ever fired a gun?
Many times.
Okay. Do you have 24-hour security?
I do.
Okay. Let me ask you about fentanyl, because that's a huge problem, and I know you're worried about it, as are we. And we've, of course, got a problem with the precursor chemicals coming into Mexico to the Mexican cartels who manufacture the fentanyl and send it into the United States. Isn't a big part of the problem that if you took the Mexican drug cartels and turned them upside down and shook them, that President Lopez Obrador would fall out of their pockets?
Well, I'll leave the metaphor aside. The department has said that we do not have an investigation of the president of Mexico.
Do you think President of Mexico is our friend?
We need cooperation from Mexico. Mexico has been somewhat cooperative with respect to our fight against the cartels, not as helpful as I wish they were, but without their cooperation, we can't be successful in destroying the cartels.
Why wouldn't the president go to President Lopez Obrador and say, no offense, but the fentanyl problem is killing Americans. The illegal immigration problem is hurting Americans. If you don't cooperate with us, and he clearly hasn't been, and he's not afraid of us, we're going to implement tariffs on Mexico until you do.
I think there are many ways to encourage cooperation from another country.
But that would do it, wouldn't it?
I don't know whether that would do it or whether...
You don't think that would get his attention?
I am not a diplomat. I'm not a foreign affairs strategist. I know we need their support and cooperation.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that would be positive or negative.
So we just ask politely.
Well, we do more than that, but
Right.
considerably more than that.
let me ask
I don't know the answer to your
Okay.
high-level
Let me ask you one
strategy
last question in my 14 seconds. I've been dying to ask you this question.
How long have you been dying to ask me this question?
Long time, long time. Mr. Hunter Biden did not pay taxes on $1 million in 2014 and 2015. And he deducted payments from his income tax for personal expenses when he did file. For hookers, for a Lamborghini, for strip clubs, for sex clubs, for porn website membership. Why did the Department of Justice let the statute of limitations run?
As you well know,
So
Senator,
you can't prosecute?
by Mr. Weiss, who was appointed by President Trump to be the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. Much of the investigation you're talking about occurred during the previous administration under Mr. Weiss. Mr. Weiss has continued his investigations. He's now a special counsel. He will issue a report which
So are
will
you saying
explain
it's
those...
Trump's fault?
Which will explain... No, I don't know whether there's fault or not. Mr. Weiss will explain this in his report.
But we can't, Mr. Hunter Biden walks free on not paying taxes on $1 million from 2014 and 15 because the Department of Justice let it happen, right?
Again, I'm not going to comment on decisions made in a pending investigation. In the end, Mr. Weiss will issue a report. I will provide the report to Congress. You will be able to question Mr. Weiss as to his reasoning. and he will be able to defend his reasoning.
Would you come with Mr. Weiss when he does that?
I'm not going to know the intricacies of Mr. Weiss's investigation. There would be no point. It's Mr. Weiss who's responsible for this investigation.
But you were head of the Department of Justice.
Yes, and I've appointed him as special counsel so that he can independently investigate this matter.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Senator Kennedy. Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Judge, for being here. I appreciate your service.
All right, now that we have watched the full exchange, let's talk about it. First, Senator John Kennedy approached this hearing with a clear strategy. Kennedy wanted to establish facts, highlight uncertainty, and then ask the uncomfortable questions that many officials would rather avoid. Right from the beginning, Kennedy focused on the Department of Justice budget. That moment actually says a lot about Kennedy's approach. Kennedy was not asking a complicated question. Kennedy simply wanted to know the size of the current budget and how much additional funding the department was requesting. What made the moment interesting was that Attorney General Merrick Garland could not immediately give the number Kennedy was referencing when mandatory spending was included. That might sound like a small detail, but when you are discussing billions of dollars in taxpayer money, details matter. Kennedy's point was simple. Government agencies often come to Congress asking for more funding. But how often do they say they can operate with less? That is a question many taxpayers probably ask themselves as well. Then Kennedy shifted the conversation to gun control, and the question about gun ownership was revealing. Garland said that Garland does not personally own a firearm but has fired one before and currently has 24-hour security protection. Kennedy seemed to be highlighting a broader debate about policymaking and personal experience. Kennedy was not accusing Garland directly, but Kennedy appeared to be pointing out that people who shape gun policy often live under very different security conditions than ordinary citizens. The conversation then moved to the fentanyl crisis, which in my opinion was one of the most important parts of the exchange. Kennedy talked about the role of Mexican cartels and the flow of chemicals used to manufacture fentanyl. Kennedy even used a colorful metaphor suggesting that if you shook the cartels upside down, the Mexican president might fall out of their pockets. Garland chose not to engage with that metaphor. Garland focused instead on the need for cooperation with Mexico and confirmed that the Department of Justice is not investigating the Mexican president. But Kennedy kept pushing. Kennedy asked why the United States does not apply stronger pressure, including tariffs, to push Mexico to cooperate more on fentanyl trafficking and illegal immigration. Whether someone agrees with that strategy or not, Kennedy raised a real policy question about how far the United States should go to protect its citizens. Then we reached the moment that grabbed the most attention. Hunter Biden. Kennedy did not tiptoe around the topic. Kennedy laid out the allegation clearly. Kennedy said that Hunter Biden failed to pay taxes on more than $1 million in income from 2014 and 2015 and listed several personal expenses that were allegedly deducted. Kennedy's main question was straightforward. Why did the statute of limitations expire on those tax charges? Garland answered carefully. Garland repeatedly pointed to Special Counsel David Weiss, explaining that Weiss is responsible for the investigation and will eventually release a report explaining the decisions made in the case. From a legal perspective, Garland stayed within the boundaries of what an attorney general can publicly discuss about an ongoing investigation. But from Kennedy's point of view, that answer likely felt incomplete because Garland still leads the Department of Justice. That tension is exactly what congressional oversight is supposed to look like. Senators push for answers and accountability, while executive officials try to protect the integrity of investigations. What stood out most to me was Kennedy's persistence. Kennedy did not raise Kennedy's voice. Kennedy did not turn the hearing into a shouting match. Kennedy simply kept asking direct questions and made sure the issues were placed on the record. Whether someone agrees with Kennedy politically or not, asking tough questions is a core part of the job of a senator. Oversight only works when lawmakers are willing to challenge powerful institutions. And in this hearing, Senator John Kennedy made sure those questions were asked. That is my take on the exchange, but I want to hear what you think. Do you think Kennedy was right to press the Attorney General this hard? Or do you think Garland handled the situation appropriately given the legal limits around the investigation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more reactions and breakdowns like this, make sure you subscribe to Congress Lens. Thanks for watching. I'm Audrey, and I will see you in the next video.